Um, just going to introduce myself. I'm Russ Huddleston. I'm with Region 9 Wetlands and Oceans section. I'm going to do just a quick 5-minute overview of the Wetland Program Development Grant. There's going to be some opportunities to really dive deeper into this program, which I'll talk about as part of the presentation here. Let's see. Whoops. Oops. There we go. So just a quick, like I said, I'm going to do a quick 5-minute. We're actually going to have a presentation from the Yurok first, and then we'll have a presentation from Buena Vista Rancheria talking about the work that they're doing with their wetland program development grants. So that's the interesting stuff. So I'm going to try to go quickly here. Just a bit about our program, the wetlands program. Part of what our mission is conservation and restoration of wetlands. But another big part of our program is working on wetland program development for states and tribes and tribal entities to develop their own wetland programs. And so that's part of what this wetland program development grant system supports, is that capacity building, basically. Oops. It's tricky buttons here. Okay, so this is a competition that happens every other year. So the next one's coming up in the spring of 2015. Any tribe, federally recognized tribe or consortium of tribes is eligible to apply for these grants. Typically, we have between $3 and $4 million for the region to allocate for these grants. Project funding typically ranges from around $70,000 to $500,000, depending on what the program is and the application. As was mentioned in the earlier session, there is a 25% match for this unless the grant is rolled into a PPG. So this can be a grant that can be combined with other grants that your tribe may have, for example, 319 programs or 106 funding or things like that, that can help reduce that match requirement for these grants. So again, a little bit about what is and what isn't eligible. This grant's a little bit different than like the grants that we just heard about in the last session, which were focused more on sort of implementation. This is a program development grant. So this is a grant that can be used to developing wetland program plans. It can be used for developing mapping and monitoring programs, identification and prioritization of wetlands, and also development of training materials. I should also mention this can be used for developing tribal water quality requirements and other things. What it doesn't fund is sort of on the ground actual funding of restoration projects unless it's associated with like a pilot project. Like if you want to do a test study for wetland restoration or something like that, that can be part of this program. But other funding sources like the 319 and 106 grants and things like that are aimed more at sort of that implementation. This is really intended to help sort of with the development, the monitoring, things like that. So just real quickly, we're going to have a lot more opportunities to learn more about the process. Oops. But just real quickly in terms of grants, as part of the application, this is a competitive process. So it's really important to tell your story. Tell us what you're going to do and how this grant's really going to help build your program. There are certain criteria that's important to read through the instructions and follow the criteria because that's how these are evaluated. Focus on what are your priorities and how this program is going to help build those priorities. And then we also have different sort of priorities as a region, things like climate change, environmental justice, certain wetland resources that are important for us, that are, things to include in the grant as applicable. So as I mentioned real quick, this is just a real quick introduction. I want to get to the interesting talks later, but Sahrye Mandavi, who's our grants coordinator for Region 9, is planning on having a webinar in February, which will be a much deeper dive into sort of the grant process and kind of the nuts and bolts of how to apply for a grant. And so I definitely encourage you to attend this remote webinar in February. We will also be part of the Tribal Clean Water Workshop that's happening next spring. So we'll plan on being there and presenting on grants. Again, getting into more of the nuts and bolts. So today, I just kind of want to hand over. Our first speakers are going to be Josh, Michelle, and Richard from the Yurok tribe. Thank you.
This is awesome. We got like a lot of interest in this. This is really special. This is cool. Thanks for being here, guys. My name is Josh Cahill. I'm the water program manager for the Yurok Tribe Environmental Department. We're going to talk a little bit about our wetlands program, but I'm going to take kind of a backseat role in this presentation and just talk about the boring admin stuff, because I've got two talented and sharp Yurok scientists with me here that actually do the work. So you guys want to hear that, you want to hear the work from them, not me, right? So I'm going to let them introduce themselves also during their segment of this presentation. And I guess we'll get started. I'll hand this over to Rich. Talk like you're mad at him, man.
Aikui Nagnath Stragon Perger SC Aikui Squinkoi Aikui Nagnow Richard Myers Awk Stragon. I am a citizen of the Yurok tribe. I have been on my homeland from the beginning. I've watched all kinds of things go on within my homeland, and yeah, that's who I am. Okay, with that, this is a traditional ancestral territory that expands from the Little River in the south and the Dynamtion Creek to the north. And from that Pacific Ocean, to the Bluff Creek. The line that you see here is the Klamath River. The Yurok Reservation has since been constrained to 1 mile on either side of the Klamath River, up to 45 miles from the Pacific Ocean. The different colors on the legend represent the diversity of the wetlands and habitat types. As you can see here, that there are a wide variety of wetland habitat types within the Yurok ancestral territory. Yeah. The wetlands are our mother sources of many of our tributaries that feed into the Klamath River. We see these species as well as many others. The Yurok people use 5-finger fern for the baskets designs. The red alder bark is used to dye the materials. The deer fern is used in cooling deer meat after a fresh kill. We are salmon people. This is a primary food for the Yurok people, and the wetlands and the watersheds that are also a primary drinking water source. As you can see, I have some baskets right there that are a direct cause of the 5-finger fern here. If you look on one of those baskets there, that's the outcome of the design there, is from that 5-finger fern. Next slide. Yep. Okay. The annual median income of the household within the Yurok Reservation is 54% of the rest of California. The reservation is also very remote. This is a factor, leads to a lot of trash dumps on the landscape. The factors lead, the Yurok Reservation has abundance of black bears and other wildlife who scatter trash, leading to the trash moving from the landscapes into the waterways. This is why we cannot talk about the environmental justice as separate from the social justice. The pollution increases climate change. It increases drought conditions, leading to increasing the surface water, increases the wetland habitats, that increases algae blooms, that increases the surface connection which leads into a lower nutrients export and decreasing the drinking water resources from the tribal members.
Let's do both from this one.
This is their pictures from our higher elements on the reservation, outside the reservation. The wetlands are changing. Wetlands within historical perennial connectivity within becoming seasonal. As mentioned in the previous slide, the wetlands are mother sources of our tributaries, in which provides drinking water for the Yurok community and wildlife habitat. So, as we see here, the use of our traditional ecological scientific knowledge is to contribute to the restoration of the protection of the wetlands that feed into the Klamath River, while combating with the effects of the climate change that we all experience as people.
So as Rich has pointed out, the Yurok Tribe Wetlands Plan doesn't just focus on ecological health, but we're striving to protect human health as well as culture and tradition. And to do so, there's also these impacts on the water insecurities on the reservation are exacerbated by climate change. So with our project purpose, we're assessing and monitoring these wetland habitats so that we can try to assess which ones are most at risk to climate change factors, and we know where to focus our efforts for protection and restoration of wetland habitat. So the EPA, outlines a core elements framework that is pretty aligned with the Yurok Wetlands Plan. So the goal that's outlined is to protect and restore wetland resources for the benefit of human health and the environment. We do this through monitoring, as I just mentioned. We'll take data and look at it and see where we need to focus our restoration effort. And Michelle's going to talk a little bit more about the monitoring effort that we use for criteria on that. We'll assess where we need to focus our restoration, and we provide protection to wetland areas by writing water quality control permits for building activities that may affect wetlands, and we've also drafted water quality standards for wetland habitat. So some important approaches that we take to try to achieve this goal are outreach and education. So there's 3 elementary schools on the reservation, and environmental staff will go to the schools to try to teach kids in the community about the importance of watersheds and wetlands. And we also have community events that the tribe holds, like the annual Salmon Festival in Klamath every year. An environmental department has a booth at the Salmon Festival with informational brochures and staffed so that we can answer questions to the community that they might have about work that we're doing in their backyard. As far as agency coordination, there's this really cool project that Rich and Michelle are going to talk about cultural burning and monitoring the soil moisture content in lands adjacent to wetlands that are culturally burned. The coordination that we do, we partnered with the USGS and Point Blue for that project. And the final approach that is outlined by the EPA is public and private partnerships. And this point is lacking on the Yurok Reservation. And this is due in part to some of the language that's included with our funding sources with the in perpetuity clauses, because Yurok people don't want to give up any jurisdiction to any outside agency to tell them what to do with their land. So that's something hopefully we can improve upon in the future.
Hi, my name is Michelle. I'm the wetland scientist for the Yurok tribe. And the purpose of the Yurok tribe Environmental Department's wetland program is to inventory, monitor, and assess wetlands within the reservation. The wetland program works alongside the Yurok tribe's watershed restoration and fisheries departments. The focus began on the estuarine wetlands in 2008 near the mouth of the Klamath River. The main goal was to implement estuary and coastal habitat restoration in order to protect salmonoid resources, particularly coho salmon, which are listed under the Endangered Species Act and an important resource for the Yurok tribe. Surveying these sites included estuary mapping, sea level rise assessments, bioassessments for benthic macroinvertebrates, and surveys for plants, birds, aquatic herpetofauna, and mammals. The Klamath River estuary sites were inventoried and assessed using CRAM, the California Rapid Assessment Method for Wetlands. And in 2012, the BMI bioassessments were conducted for the KRE wetland complexes. They were surveyed until 2017 when a shift in the higher elevation wetlands was made. So this shift included bioassessment surveys and eDNA testing, along with stage and water temperature data collecting using hobo pressure transducers in the Klamath River tributary creeks and their associated headwater wetland ponds. This data showed the presence of coastal tailed frogs, southern torrent salamanders, and the threatened foothill yellow-legged frog, which are all dependent on aquatic habitats throughout their life cycle. Hobo probes are deployed at the headwater ponds and their major offshoot creeks. And then we also continue the accretion study in the estuary. Benthic macroinvertebrates and eDNA surveys occurred from 2019 to 2023 to determine the health of the streams that stem from the wetlands to feed the Klamath River. We can determine drought resistance from these BMI species that are present. Hobo pressure transducers are deployed at each site, continuously measuring the temperature and pressure over time, recording every 2 hours. And we currently have 11 wetland ponds sites and 10 creek sites that are all on the upriver portion of the Yurok Reservation. Oh, that's good. This one first. This is a time series graph using HoboWare at one of our wetland pond sites. On the x-axis is the time, and the y-axis is the temperature shown in blue, the atmospheric pressure of the air, and then the water as well, and then the stage shown in red. And this is a more cleaned up version after the calculation of the barometric pressure is taken using the air and water measurements along with the field stage measurements.
Can you clarify the time unit on the x-axis?
It's the,
Yeah, days, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
got to do it. Got to do it.
Fire is medicine. We are fire people. Fire enriches the land within the nutrients and increases the health of the abundance of the cultural foods and medicine resources. We are studying nearby cultural burns to see if they have an effect on the water availability, service connections, periods. Furthermore, the fire is a tool to restore the meadows that were historically more dominant on the Yurok reservation. Fire removes from the thick understory and monoculture plantings by the timber companies. With less invasives on the landscapes, or more water will be available.
This is a time series graph of the preliminary data showing soil moisture that was taken after the fall burn last year. The y-axis shows the volumetric water content in the soil, while the dates are shown on the x-axis. It includes the controlled burn, which is in the orange, and then the uncontrolled, which is in orange, and the controlled site that is in green. It's interesting to note that the moisture dips a little bit lower in the unburned site than the burned site. Wetlands are unique and crucial habitats for several sensitive species, such as these plants here and the threatened foothill yellow-legged frog, which is endemic to California and Oregon. We're tracking change in wetland stage and temperature and adapting our restoration tactics to increase wetlands resilience against climate change, ensuring that these wetlands don't dry out during extreme drought conditions. We work with several different programs within the Yurok tribe who handle waste management, dump site removals, an invasive species program, and the Cultural Fire Management Council who bring fire back to the landscape to decrease thick invasive monocultures and keeping wetland and meadow habitats open. We've collected a lot of baseline wetland data, including verifying the presence of some threatened amphibian species through eDNA, calculated the change in temperature and stage throughout the seasons, and determined which wetland-fed creeks contain benthic macroinvertebrates, helping to determine the health of our wetlands. We plan to continue collecting baseline data, including complete CRAM surveys in the upland wetlands, survey for cultural Yurok plants, conduct rapid stream and spring discharge measurements, perform percolation tests on the soil surrounding wetlands, and volume calculations of the wetland ponds. We also plan to further assess the effect of cultural burning adjacent to wetland sites, and then begin restoration process within the wetland ponds. Walk loud to all the past and current Yurok tribe staff, volunteers, Watershed Stewards Program, and Cultural Fire Management Council that have worked so hard to make this project possible. And of course, to the EPA Region 9 for funding us. And we'll take questions after the next presentation.
Great. As was mentioned, we'll take questions for both presentations at the end, but I want to introduce Petra from the Buena Vista Rancheria, who's going to talk about your wetland program development grant. Thanks, Petra.
Thank you so much. I am Petra Silverman. I am the Wetlands and TEK Coordinator for the Buena Vista Rancheria of Me-Wuk Indians. And I'm very excited to talk to you guys today about our Wetland Programs Development Grant. For context, we've had a current or previous round that I'll kind of discuss a bit, and then we have a next round that I'm starting, and that will be kind of continuing the work. I'm also new to my position, 3 months and a day as of today. So do bear with me. My goal here was to kind of challenge myself to really get to know it through and through. So thank you. Next slide. So overview here, I want to do a bit of a regional context to kind of ground us in the area, the environmental concerns, the economics, then introducing the Buena Vista tribal lands, and then going into, again, past progress made on our wetlands program in past years with previous staff, and then where we're going to go from here. So that's kind of the goals here today. All right, so as zoomed out as I can make it. So highlighted here in red, we have the Amador County area. I really like the maps where you can see the lay of the land and the topography and kind of where we're dealing with. And then I did overlay the counties for additional help. And then I do like to include a bit of that pinpoint on the second map is the location of Buena Vista Rancheria more specifically. And that is without modern day borders prior to colonization, being able to understand the region we're discussing here. So zooming in further, the yellow dot in that top one is the location of Buena Vista Rancheria. So again, Amador County more broadly is largely agricultural. So we have between rangeland and farming, there's about 60% of land is kind of up in that area. A lot of wine growing, viticulture. And then we have a pretty wide span going west to east of different elevations. So going as low as like 250 feet and then to, I believe, 9,400 feet at Thunder Mountain in the east. So a lot of ecosystem variation there. We, on our region, definitely deal more with chaparral, oak savanna, oak woodlands, and definitely riparian corridors. And in this bottom part, I really want to discuss kind of grounding, like what are we considering when we're doing our environmental planning for the long-time stewardship of our lands. So we have mining, which will definitely come up later in this conversation, current and historic mining, agriculture, cattle grazing, and then I would be remiss if I didn't also mention the fire risk and the fire suppression historically that's happened in our area that's been very severe. So this map is the CAL FIRE hazard severity map. This is red is very high, orange is high, and that area that's green in the east part of the county is actual federal responsibility. So that is not like green as in good, that's also pretty high severity risk of fire. Part of my TEK role, which I'm very excited to have, also involves helping and assisting with reintroducing beneficial fire. I'm really glad that the Yurok also brought that up in their presentation. So. All right, so now to more specifically introduce Buena Vista Rancheria, which is a federally recognized Native American tribe with Northern Me-Wuk and Yurok ancestry. The ancestral lands of Buena Vista Rancheria extend from the crest of the Sierra Nevada mountains and follow the Mokelumne River watershed west into and across the Great Valley towards Mount Diablo. So that's kind of the range ancestral lands there. To explain the map here, so again, Amador, where we are, and then all of the lands here with recent acquisitions have all officially moved into trust. Those ones that were in blue and are now more recently outlined in red are the most recent ones to enter into trust. So these are the lands that we're stewarding here. A lot of these lands also have quite a bit of wetland habitat on them. Buena Vista's ancestral lands are centered around the Upasani village, which is on that long rectangular reservation in the center there, which is nestled in the greater Jackson Creek Valley at the base of the Buena Vista Sacred Peaks. But between the peaks and the Upasani village, these lands historically and in the modern day continue to hold a lot of cultural significance to the tribes in the region. However, we have to discuss, and it's very important to recognize the degradation that has occurred on these areas. The original reservation and some of the other properties have undergone lignite mining, which has created ongoing water quality issues. We deal with acidic and highly corrosive waters. Neighboring properties still have other types of mining, clay mining occurring. So this really brings those greater regional concerns very close to home. And these are some of the factors that need to be considered in working towards tribal land stewardship, especially when we go onto the topic of water quality and wetlands work. All right, so we know that there's a lot of benefits to, there we go. We know there's a lot of benefits to ecosystems when we're talking about wetland habitat. Ecologically, groundwater recharge, nutrient cycling, water filtration, really important habitat for migratory birds, as refuge along their greater migrations. So we know there's that ecologically speaking, but wetlands also have this really tremendous cultural significance as homes to plants and animals, and that's a lot of Me-Wuk culture and greaterly, just more indigenous cultures more broadly, have a lot of significance to this habitat. Wetlands are gathering zones for people, quite literally for congregating and ceremony, but also for gathering and tending to materials, whether that's for food, medicine, regalia, basketry, sweat lodge materials. And again, also just for propagating plants to ensure the growth and health into the future. Photographed here, I have mugwort on the far. That's a very baby Western pond turtle that was found a couple years ago. Western pond turtles are the only native freshwater turtles in California and are a species of concern. And then that bottom one is actually, I was training with the Tribal Eco Restoration Alliance up by Clear Lake, and they were showing us how to create coal holders to do cultural burning practices with tule. Tule is definitely an important plant for Me-Wuk people, and one that I'll be discussing further later. Okay. Wait. Okay. So we already talked about it a little bit, but there's this core elements framework put forth by the EPA. And I kind of added these stars so you can really kind of see which ones we are most prioritizing in our current version of the Wetlands Program Development Grant. So we have monitoring and assessment, which is kind of our main one. And then you'll see that water quality standards are definitely another thing that are pretty incorporated into the work we're doing, and certain restoration protection activities as well. So I'll go and explain that a little further now. So starting with monitoring and assessment. So getting a little bit more into depth on that. In developing our wetlands program plan, we use the 3-level monitoring and assessment strategy put forth by the EPA. As you can see, there's different levels of complexity encompassed in each of those layers. So level 1, you might need some, inventory like wetlands training for, whether it's GIS mapping or wetlands delineation. Level 2 might require CRAM training, the California Rapid Assessment Method for wetlands. And level 3 entailing a lot more in-depth, very highly detailed assessment of the wetlands and different aspects of them. So previous staff have started conducting these, mostly levels 1 and 2 assessments on some of our wetlands. A lot of these do need updates because you need to know what is the health of your wetlands ongoing. So you have to be updating these as well. And then there's definitely more in-depth assessments that are needed. So I'd mentioned that CRAM training previously. So here are some photos from that. I was able to attend a CRAM practitioners level training in August. Of 14 of us who were in the class, 4 of us of the 14 were working directly for tribes, which was really awesome and cool to see. Another notable and interesting element of CRAM is that you do need 2 trained practitioners and able to actually do a survey. If you only have 1, the worry is that you're going to kind of skew the data based off your own kind of biases that we all kind of have internally. So I was very fortunate in that Matessa Martin, who's our water coordinator, was able to come with me and do that training so that we can kind of go forth and update a lot of these assessments, these level 2 assessments more specifically. All right, so progress made. This is kind of going back into like the previous work done with previous staff with Buena Vista Rancheria. So let's see. One of the biggest major elements was finishing up our Wetlands Program Plan, or WPP document, which basically outlines monitoring and assessment strategies, as well as defining indicators of wetland health and long-term objectives for tribal wetlands. Establishing and composing the WPP was definitely a major undertaking. Previous staff were also able, again, to start some of those assessments like I'd mentioned. And again, just even building the framework for how we conduct those assessments. So that'll be very important moving forward. Another big accomplishment is that we were able to contract to have some shallow monitoring wells installed so that we can begin building our baseline data collection and understanding some of the hydrologic connectivity around our wetlands. I'll discuss that a little more in a second. And lastly, definitely restoration activities, which I'll touch on. Oh, photographed. That is cattail removal by previous staff. We have overabundance of cattail in a couple of our wetland areas. And then that is the installation of the monitoring well on one of those sites on tribal lands. All right, so on that kind of baseline data collection that I'd mentioned, let me just explain these graphs really quick so you can understand. The blue line is the groundwater level. Those orange dots were manual measurements, and these spikes on the bottom are precipitation levels. This is from May 2022 to May 2023, so it's a year's worth of data collection. And one of the more interesting findings you can see here is that our third well had the greatest, as soon as rain hits, you can see how quickly the groundwater increases in that area and kind of sustains. So that was a really, really interesting way to understand the hydrologic connectivity in this area. And we believe it's because the western stream is nearest to this area. So again, trying to better understand how our wetlands are functioning. So on restoration activities, these are a bit of outdated photos, but we have some deergrass restoration and some other riparian native plant restoration. These are old, so they are much more grown in by now. And then definitely not photographed. And I wanted to mention that, some of our restoration activities end up being a little bit more experimental, especially as we're trying to cater to trying to rebuild the cultural health of our wetlands, which I'll touch on more. But tule restoration is one of those. So I don't have any photos of it, but previous staff were doing some kind of cutting down cattail and doing some tule plugs to try to reintroduce tule in some of our wetlands. Some took better than others, and I really look forward to using the kind of past methodology and see what didn't work to try to make that more successful into the future. And again, protection activities as well. So like we do have some issues with cattle and trying to keep them off of some of our beautiful wetlands. So that is another kind of ongoing working issue. Let's see. So this is kind of exciting for me to kind of talk about like where we are going forward with the next wetlands grant. So to get into a bit of detail, these top two bullets you can see are about updating the Wetlands Program Plan since we're coming up on our 5-year update. As I've expressed, there's definitely more monitoring and assessment activities and of course restoration and protection activities that are outlined in our current WPP, that Wetlands Program Plan. So working with our water coordinator to get these done and to continue improving our understanding of our wetlands over time. That's very important work. The bottom two bullet points are the newer objectives, and those are pretty exciting to me because they do tie in a little bit more with the TEK role. So the first one is about developing indicators of cultural health of our wetlands. There's been some extensive work in developing cultural indicators for freshwater streams in New Zealand. So that's based more on Maori people's cultural indicators. There's a really interesting paper by Craig Bishop in 2019, if anyone's interested. But that is going to be a very helpful starting framework as we're kind of looking at how to cater that to our regions and what matters culturally. So to truly develop this based around Me-Wuk culture and perspectives, this will involve speaking with elders and knowledge holders to help inform these indicators of cultural health. So I'll be working very closely with our TIPO coordinator, Jesse Galvan, on this. Additionally, that last bullet point, due to the Supreme Court case Sackett v. EPA, there is a need to develop a definition of tribal waters to add extra frameworks for protections of our wetlands and waters. So these are two objectives that will take some time for sure, but I'm very, very excited to begin working on them. Okay, so just to finish up here, those are some pictures of some botanicals. I'm very much a plant person at heart. So those are some botanicals from our tribal lands. But to wrap up, the mentality of Buena Vista is to say that culture is as the environment, environment as culture. So much of this work is about understanding how entwined those two truly are, and being able to secure this funding aligns with the greater goals and interests of Buena Vista, which is to preserve, protect, and tend to tribal wetlands, both on and around our lands, current lands, and within the greater ancestral territory of the tribe. It's just my closing slide, but thank you so much to Jasleen, Assistant Director, for all the help with this. And now I believe we're opening to Q&A if our Yurok representatives want to come up as well.
Folks, please introduce yourself and then ask your question.
My name is.
Nice job.
Hello? No, it's not.
Can I grab your microphone?
This question is for Joshua and the Yurok group. There has been dam removals on the Klamath. So have you seen an increase in water quantity and increase in riparian wetlands? And do you have plans to pick up more work with that? Since, they have been doing the dam removals. And the second part, I want to congratulate each and every one of you for your work with protecting wetlands.
I can speak a little bit first. The Yurok tribe has a revegetation effort that's been going for at least 7 years, maybe longer, banking native seeds, working with a lot of other tribes that are local. We got some Quartz Valley folks right here, the Karuk tribe. So there's an increase in the riparian and the reservoir footprints for sure. It was beautiful. I went up there in the spring. The poppies were all blooming. It looked like a cartoon. The hillside was orange. It was amazing. As far as water quantity, I haven't really seen a difference in water quantity, although I've been more focused on water quality. So there may be changes that I'm not aware of. Water quality issues, we're doing compliance monitoring for toxic metals at the moment. And I think the main thing that's been in the news is there's been some big turbidity slugs from dam sediment that's moved down. The good news is it doesn't seem to be affecting fish or negatively impacting them as much. I think we dodged a bullet. Like, I think that it could have been a lot worse. Thankfully, disease has been much lower in the Klamath this year. So I think not having that co-founding factor helped the fish out. Now there's fish above the dams, which is really awesome. I don't know if Rich or Michelle want to add anything to that. And I just encourage everybody to check out the baskets and the lopsal that Rich brought in to showcase with some of the wetland plants from the Yurok reservation. But thanks for the question.
Hi, thank you so much. That was really interesting. My name's Annika. I'm with the California Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment. And I'm just curious because I've spoken to a tribe that's dealing with surface water decreases, and they've been speaking a lot about groundwater pumping. And so in each of your areas, could you speak to whether what influence you've seen groundwater pumping have or other competing claims for water?
Okay. I don't know if it's okay. It's working. Yeah. So in our area, yeah, there's definitely issues with groundwater pumping. Again, also just water quality from those wells is definitely a concern. So I was definitely taking notes at one of those meetings yesterday about water safety. But with some of our areas, one of the things we're trying to get a better gauge on is the drawback rate. So how quick are they to refill and replenish, and really understanding kind of, again, that's a little bit more depth into the hydrologic connectivity, because groundwater is so complex and nebulous and very, very difficult. So we are actually, that's like one of the next steps, is to kind of figure out the drawback rate and see how much recovery is there and what damage is really being done by overpumping, especially with the amount of heavy agriculture in our region. So currently something we're working on, and definitely a very, very good question, honestly.
So in Is this on? Okay. In Yurok territory, there's definitely maybe not necessarily groundwater pumping, but there have been a lot of illegal agriculture operations that have drawn a lot of surface water. And that's definitely impacted streams and impacted people's drinking water, both from a water quantity as well as a water quality standpoint. Upriver from the Yurok Reservation, there are a lot of groundwater draw impacts to one of the major tributaries. Quartz Valley knows all about it. Lots of illegal water draw from agriculture, and lots of weird creative arguments to try to make it sound legal. So the tribal consortium on the Klamath River is definitely trying to fight those as we speak.
So my question is, Kathy Buchanan from Bear River Band. I'm the Environmental Natural Resources Director, and there are groundwater maps that the state of California has, and I think that is a good tool to use to figure out where, and those maps do, I believe, have vector flows, so you can figure out what direction is, and groundwater pumping, over pumping is detrimental to surface waters, because if you don't have groundwater, you don't have surface water. And the lower the groundwater is, the higher concentration your contaminants are going to be, right? So, and the other thing is, do you have a map of your well locations? Yes. And and then put the well locations on top of the groundwater map and figure out where the influence is coming from.
Yes, we do have that, at least again for our tribal lands. I think another layer of the concern is also just, what are our neighbors up to? And what pumping is occurring on those other ones. Also, definitely within our region, we've had issues where there are certainly wells that were not reported on, and kind of discovering these other well sites and things like that. So that's another layer, but thank you. I think that's really, I do appreciate that.
And for the, you're in Humboldt County, correct? The Humboldt County, because the cannabis farms, we have the same issue too, the overpumping. And Humboldt County, actually, we are, we've been talking to our other neighbors, and Humboldt County has not been enforcing the overpumping laws. They haven't been. And so, yeah, that's another legal issue.
Yeah, definitely. And I hope that you guys are involved in that fight. Good luck with that.
Do you have a question?
Well, I have a comment. The turbidity slugs that you're talking about, that's actually a natural occurrence in every river. And I'm a soil scientist. Those nutrients are actually the base of the food pyramid for salmonids and everything. That's what, and you don't usually see this on most food webs and pyramids, but that's what the algae eat. And then it goes all the way up. And the bad part is when there's a dam and you get that all summer when it's not supposed to be happening.
Yeah, I think you're right that it is a natural occurring thing when you get, especially when you get high water in this region of the U.S. But what makes it unnatural is it's 120 years worth of sediment that's coming through. And yeah, the Klamath River is a very productive river. Even when the dams were there was lots of fish food, lots of fish. So yeah, thank you though.
Ask a question from our chat, which is from Sahrye Madavi from EPA. Let's see. Petra, you mentioned one of your current/future goals is to develop definitions for protection of tribal water. Is BVT working with other tribes on this?
I believe the goal is to develop framework and then to make it very much accessible to all tribes that would like to develop similar framework. The goal is very much to share the wealth in that way. Though again, I think having conversations with at least some other tribes in our region, and again, as we talk with, some elders are definitely from other tribes within the region. So it will to some degree definitely take on more than just Buena Vista's specific goals, and it'll kind of be a little bit collaborative in that way. But again, that will take a minute to take shape, so bear with me.
Okay. So another question, what was the purpose of the eDNA testing?
We did eDNA testing. I'm going to let Michelle answer this. Don't do this.
To determine what species are present in our creeks that are coming out of the headwater ponds in the upper elevation ponds.
Are you then going to trace the DNA back to wherever they were from?
So we went to specific creeks that feed off of the headwater ponds. So depending on which creek they came from, then they likely came from that pond. But I think, would like to do some more eDNA testing in the actual ponds themselves.
I just wanted to add to that. Part of it was to document the presence of endangered amphibian species, and also to look at benthic macroinvertebrate assemblages, because we just touched on it, but a previous study, we looked at the BMI complex, and we can characterize drought resilience of a watershed based upon the bug community. And that was a big part of the eDNA as well.
We need to wrap up.
Sure.
Our speakers, one last round of applause. Yeah.
Thank you all.
We need to get set up for the next session, but there's a few questions that's still lingering. So if people want to approach the speakers, by all means, but we need to set up for the next presentation. So thank you.
Yeah, we'll be around.